Hey there, and welcome back to the OT Schoolhouse podcast. The OTPF states that clients may require access to and the ability to use technology such as cell or smartphones, computers or tablets, and video game consoles to carry out their daily routines and occupations. At the OT Schoolhouse, we totally understand that, and that's why we're diving deep into the use of online media, both social media as well as other types of media, in order to help school-based OTs help their clients and further their education and professional development. So today is actually going to be the first professional development opportunity through the podcast that we've offered in a while. And you can find that at otschoolhouse.com/PD as in professional development. And the objectives for today are for you and everyone out there to understand current trends related to online use among school-based OTs, be able to identify locations on the web to find support and guidance, and be able to understand the importance of being self-aware when consuming or producing online media. We just actually presented this at a recent conference here in California, and we're excited to be able to share this all with you. So right after the break, we're going to get into this, and you're going to hear all the amazing content we have for you. So stick around. Abby and I will be right back.
Hello and welcome to the OT Schoolhouse podcast, your source for the latest school-based occupational therapy tips, interviews, and research. Now, to get the conversation started, here are your hosts, Jayson and Abby. Class is officially in session.
Hey there, welcome to episode number 17 of the OT Schoolhouse podcast. You know, it's been a while, but Abby and I are on the podcast for the entire show today. There's no guest. It's just her and I. So, Abby, how's it going?
It's going great. This is like a throwback.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been, I don't know. I don't even remember the last episode where it's just you and I.
No, it's been a long time. We got to do this more often, Jayson.
Yeah. I mean, I know we have a bunch of guests lined up for the upcoming shows, but yeah, we really need to do this a little more often. So maybe we can. We'll see what happens. And yeah, so do you have anything that you want to share before we get on our way?
No, just we finished up with the Occupational Therapy Conference for the State of California Occupational Therapy Association.
Of California.
Of California.
Yes, of California.
Thanks for adding that. So many letters in the title. Okay, so we just finished up that. And then I'm doing an in-service on sensory with the teachers at one of my school sites to kind of build capacity with one of my coworkers. And we're getting ready to do that. I think it's going to be pretty interesting. I'm hoping to use it and share it with you guys, you know, so that you have information on how to provide an in-service, if that's something that you want to do for your school sites, or if you have already, maybe I can give you some tips on how to do it better, or maybe you can give me some tips. Maybe my in-service isn't going to be that great, and I need tips. Who knows?
Are you doing that with another OT or a different professional?
No, another OT. We're talking a lot about how to help students that are dysregulated, becoming dysregulated, or have or preventing dysregulation. So I kind of think we give the strategies a lot, and we discuss sensory strategies, and the teachers all tend to really know all the strategies, all the tools. They will come to me and say, hey, I think so-and-so needs this. And I'll go and look, and maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I think it's almost the implementation of those strategies and using them in an effective way. And then also just noting that like some strategies, you know, you can use would be like behavior modification type things too. They kind of all go together. So it's kind of one of those trainings. It's not is it sensory or behavior? It's actually, you can't really separate the two. That's kind of our approach to this.
Yeah, that's cool. Because I was actually just talking to a speech therapist, and her and I, and actually we're going to see if the psychologist would like to get in on it too, but we want to do a training for both the teachers as well as the aides. Because a lot of times, you know, we teach the teachers, but then it's the aides, and especially those mod severe classes that are working with the kids so much. And so
the aides are going to be at our training too.
Perfect. That's awesome. Are you guys doing it after school, before school, during school?
After school on one of the short days.
Oh, very cool. A professional development day or whatever the school has set up.
Professional. Yeah. And then we're also doing a fine motor one where we're running centers, but they're all fine motor based centers. So we're going to do that kind of thing too. It's really exciting. I'm super excited.
I look forward to hearing more about that once you got it done and taken care of. When are you doing that?
The in-service will be next Tuesday. So we're finishing up our, finishing it up / starting it because we're both procrastinators this week, tomorrow and Thursday, and then we'll be presenting next week. So it's kind of cool though. I'm really excited about it because we're trying to touch on everything and kind of explain it in a more functional way so that teachers can use it versus, I don't know, I think sometimes it can get a little dicey. You're like, oh, they need proprioception for input, but a teacher doesn't understand, or like maybe they don't have the theory in the background of recognizing that. So we want to give them those tools.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like Abby said, we also attended the Occupational Therapy Association of California conference, OTAC conference, this past weekend. And
way better.
Thank you, Abby. Anyways, Abby and we actually presented, and that's what we are going to talk about today. We're going to present not the entire slideshow / presentation that we presented at OTAC, but a good portion of it for you all to hear. And that's actually about how OTs, how school-based OTs specifically, but this kind of equates to all OTs, utilize online media, and also a little bit how social media affects not only us, but our students, and how we can kind of act upon online media. So we're going to talk about that. But first, I just want to give a big thank you to anyone out there that was at OTAC and said hello, or all the presenters out there that were at OTAC. There's a lot of good school-based content this year. We had OTs, actually. One was from, I think it was Ohio, that came out to talk to us. And we had one of the OT directors from Los Angeles Unified School District that talked a little bit. We had the Pasadena Unified School District special ed director, who was actually an occupational therapist and went back to get her psychology credential and is now the SPED director. And that was super inspiring to see an OT in such a high level position. So a big shout out to all those people that made OTAC great, as well as the staff up at OTAC, which is awesome. So before we get into it, Abby's got her finger waving at me like she's got something to say.
Well, I just wanted to bring up that we had the really cool opportunity to meet up with, kind of a meetup situation with Alexis, who organized it at Rubio's. And it was with you and I and Sarah and Jenna. Mm-hmm. And it was all of us OTs kind of discussing how OT is doing online and what are all of our projects and how we're advocating for the profession and sort of what these little projects are. And they're all doing some really cool things. Yeah,
definitely a big shout out to Sarah. Actually, she's actually doing a podcast kind of like you're listening to right now. And her podcast is OT for Life, LYFE. And it actually just released last week by the time you're listening to this podcast. So big shout out to her. She's an early intervention OT. And her podcast is not just about EI, early intervention. She just has this huge mission for sharing OT like in all capacities to all people. And so be sure to subscribe to the OT for Life podcast as well as ours.
Yes.
What was Jenna?
She works as a professor.
But she was a dementia specialist, right?
Yes. And she consults with nursing homes. I remember her telling me about that part of her position as well. She kind of does multiple things. She has her hand in lots of different practice areas in occupational therapy, very diverse background. And that was kind of cool to see or hear about.
Yeah. And then you have Alexis, who is kind of doing a little bit of everything. She's all over the place. She has a kind of a Facebook Live that she calls OT Scope, or the podcast project. That's kind of one of the areas she's in, but she's really dabbing in a little bit of everything. She's on social media at 8AlexisJoelle, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes at otschoolhouse.com/episode 17. But yeah, it was just really cool meeting up with these group of OTs that are doing so much in the profession.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all kind of, quote unquote younger OTs, and we're able to access the internet. We have websites, and we're just trying to get OT out there, not only to
Right.
other OTs, but to parents, to caregivers, to people working with dementia, educators, everything. We're all OTs, just in a different area, and so we can have a different influence. So
That's
yeah,
right.
super cool.
And it's something that's like an extremely needed area in our profession. OT, we're not great at advocating for our profession all the time, particularly online. It seems like nobody really understands occupational therapy. So I think the more voices in social media and that are doing podcasts or having platforms on Instagram or Facebook, I think the better. Because if we advocate for our profession, then we legitimize our profession too. So it's kind of owning that what we do is pretty stinking awesome. I mean, for lack of a better way of putting it.
No, absolutely right. And you know what? We're definitely going to have a podcast about advocacy because,
I think so.
especially at OTAC this year, the two key themes that I took away from OTAC were, one, building capacity within occupational therapists, and the other, which was huge, was becoming a go-to OT. And that's frontlined by Sabrina McCarley out here. And she wants, us to stand up, not only in our own jobs, advocating for caseloads and workloads and all that good stuff, but also talking to legislators out there and letting them know what our concerns are and how we can better help our population. So, two big key terms this year were advocacy and building capacity. So,
Yeah.
all right.
Cool.
Well, I think that was a long enough introduction.
We had a lot to catch up on. It's been
We did. And you know what? We did miss last week's podcast episode because of OTAC. Actually, we were just so busy with that, but we're happy to be back. And actually, we're going to share with you exactly what we were doing at OTAC last week. So, sorry for the 1 week delay, but we're getting this out there to you now. And we're going to jump into our presentation on online media and how it can affect school-based OTs, how it can affect students, and how we can have an effect on social media and online media. So I guess we should jump into it then.
Yeah, let's get to it.
All right. Well, before I forget, I do want to let you all know that since we have this PowerPoint, because we presented it at OTAC, we're actually going to put this PowerPoint up again on the show notes at otschoolhouse.com/episode 17. So you'll have access to these show notes or this PowerPoint. So if you want to take notes, or if you're that type of person, go ahead. But if you're driving and you don't want to take notes, feel free to access the podcast over at, or not the podcast, the show notes for the podcast at otschoolhouse.com/episode 17. So like I kind of mentioned earlier, this presentation was all about online media and how OTs can utilize online media. And I specifically say online media because it's not just social media. We also took into account, the ability to access AJOT online, the ability to listen to podcasts, the ability to access blogs online, the ability to access any journal online for that matter, Of course, putting this presentation together, we did a little background, and we were really surprised to find out that the terminology podcast, while the terminology of podcast may be new, the idea of streaming audio, of course, has been around for a long time. Of course, there was radios, right, but originally podcasts kind of started back in 1985 before any social media, of course, and or any blogs came out. And then, in 2003, we started to see LinkedIn and WordPress. And then podcasts began to get a little bit bigger in 2004. Facebook came around in 2004, YouTube in 2005. And now, we have Pinterest and Instagram in 2010. And there's so many more out there. But as you know, these are kind of like the big ones, Twitter in 2006. And so it's really cool that we have access to all these, but it's also a little bit scary because our information is out there. And you know what? Maybe we'll still do our little exercise that we did for this presentation, and near the end, we'll ask you all to do something for us at the end of the show. But yeah, we just kind of want to get out there. That people are using social media. People are using it not only for using their personal lives, but professional lives out there too. I'm sure you are. So many of you follow us on the blog, or you follow our podcast, or you follow OT Schoolhouse the Facebook page. And, these are all areas where you're able to learn new stuff, just like we follow other blogs and stuff. So
actually, yeah, social media has taken on kind of a life of its own. And the term occupation, as defined by the Occupational Therapy Practice Framework, refers to the daily life activities in which people engage. And I think a lot of us engage repetitively, almost compulsively, in social media, in online media in general. And that comes a lot from just having it right in the palm of our hand. I think with the fact that we have our mobile devices are pretty much tiny computers that are handheld and allow us to access information and social media nearly regularly, that it has become a daily occupation that could be defined as a daily occupation. I think it's a little bit leisure. I think a lot of us use it also as part of our work occupations even. Sometimes it's play. Sometimes I'm looking at stupid videos of cats and dogs.
That's definitely leisure.
Right. And sometimes it's leisure, just in that I'm connecting socially and making plans with friends. I get invites to Facebook group activities, or somebody sets up a page like, come paint with me. One of my friends does that, where she hosts paint nights at her house. And so she'll set up a page for that. So that's kind of a leisure occupation. So if you think about clients that we have or students that we have that are in high school, elementary school, they're accessing their Facebook, and a lot of them are using it to find these leisure activities or to, like I said, look at dumb videos or post dumb videos. And two, I think it's interesting to note an interesting statistic by the Pew Research Center, that 51% of Facebook users report accessing Facebook multiple times a day, just like what I was indicating. So I'm not sure how many times you access it, Jayson, but I'm on there too many times. Like, I've even put my settings on my phone in black and white just so that I stop looking at it as often.
Yeah, I turned off. I turned off all my notifications, so I don't get notifications from Facebook or emails and stuff like that to try to help out. But even then, I'm not gonna lie, I still find myself, just looking at my phone as I'm walking from one classroom to another. I know I shouldn't be, but every now and then, it's kind of that Facebook addiction thing that's out there right now, and I'm kind of there. But
or even just etiquette in IEP meetings. Like, I notice a lot of people just have their phones right on the table. I make a conscious decision to either leave my phone in my office or tuck it into my
your
bag and like the very bottom, so that I'm not tempted to pick it up, because I have found myself just compulsively picking it up in meetings. And that is not good etiquette.
No, definitely not. But it's not good etiquette, but it's definitely less taboo than it used to be. Like, people understand, no one like makes a big thing of it when someone's phone rings in the middle of a meeting anymore. It's just like, oh, that person's phone ringing. Let's keep talking. We know that person's going to put it on silent in half a second. And same thing, parents and other people, they're busy. We understand that you can send a quick text message. Then again, you shouldn't be on your phone the entire meeting or anything. But it's kind of like, we understand as professionals that people are busy, that this isn't the only thing going on in the world. And, 99% of the time that people are using their phone now it is business. So,
right.
But yes,
however,
you need to be.
Would you venture to say, though, however, that if that's the case, then you're not present for the concerns of the IEP meeting? Because I think for me, it's like a state of mind. Like, I want to be present to address what is happening in that room. We all have busy schedules, and we all have to be there during that time, including the parent. So I'm kind of, while I appreciate the understanding, I just know that, like, staying present during those meetings mentally is important, although I'm not good at it all the time.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like the moments where, a kid or a parent brings up a concern, and really quickly I can find an app that will help that kid. Like, that's kind of the things that I'll often be looking up, either whether I'm on my computer, my tablet, or my phone. If I know this student has access to an iPad and they're bringing up a concern, I'm going to real quick grab my phone, do a quick search for speech to text, and see what apps are out there that this kid can use. I mean, that's how I found an app called Speechify, where I can take a picture of any text, and then it'll read that text to the kid. And I would never have found that. I mean, maybe I would have taken a note on that, gone back to my office the next day, looked it up. But so it's kind of, if you're using it for work, it's a little more appropriate. It obviously looks more appropriate if you're doing it on your computer rather than your smartphone.
Right.
So, try and, if you're going to be on technology, definitely I would suggest it being either a tablet or that you're taking notes on, or a computer you're taking notes on. But sometimes you do need to use that phone to kind of look up something. But
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just a double-edged sword.
yeah, that was a huge tangent, but I'm glad we did that, because that is something that us school-based therapists do kind of run into. It's IEPs are 3 hours long sometimes, man, and it gets hard to stay focused for 3 hours. Our kids know that. Before we move on, I do want to mention that we're kind of going on this, is that there's not a lot of stuff out there about social media and online media from our organizations. The World Federation of OT, WFOT, they actually do have a social media guideline document on their website. But AOTA, California OTAC, even NBCOT has very, very little, if any, information about how to use social media, or how we should not use social media, or that much. So it's just something to point out. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got to get it together.
Yeah. Right. Surprisingly, although there's not much on the website, the OTPF does actually pretty extensively talk about the use of computers, not necessarily social media too much, but the use of computers, tablets, and video game consoles and phones, because they understand that, that is an occupation. And I honestly, some people might have a big issue with me saying this, but I could easily go into a high school today and justify making a goal for a kid to access Facebook, because that is a meaningful occupation for all teenagers.
Absolutely.
And so
probably even more so like Snapchat and Instagram.
Well, yeah, right. And so I could easily see a parent saying, hey, my kid's not able to access leisure and play. They're not able to socialize. And, how big is texting and being able to access all those social media sites? I'm not going to go in and like completely just offer this to every kid on an IEP. No, but
right. Calm down, everyone.
But I could see someone saying they can't access their education because they can't access social media and have those interactions, those typical interactions with their peers. So, all right.
That's very true.
There's one more quote that I wanted to, or at least a resource. This is actually from the Journal of Further and Higher Education. And it states that Twitter has the potential to become a credible platform for continuing professional development, or CPD, not only for clinicians' professional development, but also for the advancement of profession itself. And, well, I know Abby is huge on advancement of profession. So how do you use social media, online media to advance our profession of OT?
Well, I mean, I think you and I can both definitely vouch for this. Just, I think sharing treatment ideas, you're sharing articles that you're finding, you're sharing your own, I mean, I guess that's a really broad way of putting it, but I would say the other way is when you're looking at professional development, I mean, look at the Facebook groups we're both involved in. You get on there and everybody's sharing ideas. And a lot of times you'll get backup from research articles in those groups. Like somebody will say, oh, I do this, this, and this, and here's a study. And so those things are pretty cool in that respect. Twitter, I didn't realize I even had a Twitter account still until I, like we were talking about, we're going to do an experiment later. So we'll go into that, everybody. But I think one of the things, I could see it being a good continuing professional development. I mean, look at the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a prime example where we're taking an audio platform and giving education. And there's no real reason why this isn't continuing education. We're using research, we're discussing research, and we're promoting educational values of our profession.
Exactly.
To grow.
Yeah. No doubt about that.
I would say that's accurate.
Yeah. And so what really led to us completing this presentation that we did for OTAC was actually that we were almost doing research for the OT Schoolhouse. We wanted to know what people were looking at, specifically what school-based OTs were really looking at when it comes to online media, social media. Were they using social media to access professional development? Were they looking up research articles through Facebook groups, Facebook pages, podcasts, Instagram, Pinterest? And so we actually did a little survey to find out. And I'm sure some of you listening now actually participated in this survey. And thank you so much if that was you. And even if it wasn't you, we thank you for listening right now, because this shows that you're actually interested in knowing the results of that survey. And so appreciate you having to listen.
Oh, for sure. Which also brings up another point, because you just shared another research survey on Facebook from, not by us, but somebody else. But that's another way people are utilizing social media for the profession, is not just to advocate ideas, but to actually do studies of what we're all doing. And it is such a quick, easy, with things like SurveyMonkey and like all these different things, it's really easy to get a quick
participants.
Survey. And participants, and like a larger sample and a wider ranging sample. So, I mean, this is a great opportunity for OT.
Yeah, and what the the link that you're talking about is actually I believe it's Stanbridge. It's one of my fellow thesis advisors from Stanbridge University down here in Southern California, and she's actually looking at some of the difficulties that new pediatric therapists have. I don't want to lead people into responses, but if you do visit our Facebook page, the link is there, as well as the notes. It'll only be up until the early part of November 2018. But it is about pediatric therapists that are within the first 3 years of their practice. And so if you're interested, we definitely invite you to have a look at that. So, but getting back to our actual little survey that we did, again, this wasn't an IRB approved survey or anything. This is just a survey that we did, and it started out as kind of like a market research for the OT Schoolhouse, but we got back information that we thought other OTs might want to know about, and it kind of helped us out, and we think it might be able to help you out. So through this survey, we reached out to OTs in all different realms of social media or online media. We sent it out to our email list. We sent it out on Facebook. We sent it out on Reddit, a few other places, and we had, of the 241 respondents, we had 77% occupational therapists fill it out. Almost 14% occupational therapy assistants filled this out, and 8.8% of the participants that filled this out were students. There's a small handful of other professionals that also did, but of those people that did fill it out, 42% of them were school-based therapists, 10% worked in another pediatric setting, and another 10% about worked in the acute rehab. So it was really cool, the diverse population that we had, as well as, we had a pretty good spread of not just OTs, but also occupational therapy assistants and students, which was super cool. And so the first question we asked, I'm going to let Abby tell you a little bit about this, but the first question was to those participants was, which of the following do you regularly read or visit as part of your quest to better yourself as an OT or an OT aide? And so I'm going to let Abby talk about what the results to that specific question were.
Right. So the results to that were that the majority of people that responded to this survey, about 48.8% said AJOT. Yay, AJOT.
And AJOT's actually going all online. It's going paperless, I believe, next year. And so you're going to have to access it online. You're not going to get those quarterly journals in your mail.
And it should be noted that they could pick more than one response, right? So that wasn't actually the highest response level, but also another interesting thing were Facebook groups. So they regularly visit Facebook groups. 66.3% of respondents said that they regularly also visited Facebook groups. So those could be one person could be going to both of those, right, Jayson?
Of course. And
so I'm just double checking that.
Many do. Yeah.
Other things that folks are looking at often were professional development websites.
And that's
Facebook. Yeah.
Sorry, that's like MedBridge and
Bridge.
occupational therapy. Throw this out there since we did just say MedBridge, that you can get a discount at MedBridge Education, the website, if you use promo code OT Schoolhouse. But yeah, that was another big one, was MedBridge and occupational therapy. And those were both actually thrown out during our live presentation that we did at OTAC. Several people said, yeah, I have, a handful of people at least said, yeah, I use those for continuing education.
Right. And then just using AOTA.org, I know I look up things on there often. I like kind of their quick fact lists for different areas, other journals. So people are still looking at professional journals, and then just other websites. Half of everybody responded, 122 people said they're just looking at other websites to better themselves. So maybe that could be blogs potentially, or different things of that nature. Pinterest was another big one, with 87 respondents saying that they use that to better themselves. I'm thinking I use that often for treatment ideas. So if I'm looking for something to do with a kid, I might look on there. So it was a pretty interesting survey in that respect. What else? I mean, are there anything else, Jayson?
You mentioned the top two, the AOTA/AJOT, and then Facebook groups and pages. The actual third top one, I guess, was actually Google and Google Scholar. And so you can imagine, people, that's where everyone starts nowadays, just Google. Type in occupational therapy interventions for kids, or pediatric OT, or school-based OT interventions. Of course, Google is popular, but also surprisingly, Google Scholar was very popular. And of course, that is like Google's version of a search engine for research. And so that was cool to see that people are actually using Google Scholar to find research. And some people, again, just a handful, threw us for a loop and added in their own comment and said, it depends on what I'm looking for. And that kind of is exactly what I was happy to hear that. That means not everyone's going to our website to find research articles. They're going to where they should be, like AJOT or the Open Journal of OT, or to some other journal to look for that research, So that's good to hear. People aren't going to one place, because no website is like a fit all for everything. So
you might want to Google the search term, then you might want to check for an article in AJOT, and then you might want to go to Pinterest to find the activity that is going to flow with all of those things. Absolutely.
So the next question that we asked was, how frequently do you consume any of the above content as it relates to improving yourself as an OT or an occupational therapy assistant, and do you look for treatment ideas? And so 42% of people that filled out this survey said that they search some sort of one of those websites that we just mentioned before 5 times, or at least up to 5 times a week. 42% of OTs are searching up to 5 times a week for OT related content. So that's like every weekday, every day of the week, except for weekends, they are looking for OT content online. And then another 18% said they're going further beyond that. They're saying at least once a day, up to 10 times per week, they're going online. So that's pretty, over half of us are basically looking at our computer or at our phone on a daily basis for stuff related to work. Like, I don't know, that it seems like a lot to me. Like, honestly, I don't think everyone does that. But it's cool to know that us OTs are using social media and online media to find, to better ourselves and to better the treatments that we can provide for our kids.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And then the last question was, how frequently do you seek out research articles to read in order to improve yourself as an OT or an OTA? And we had, the responses were once a year, up to 5 times a year, 5 to 10 times a year, monthly, a few times a month, or several times a month. And it seems that people, I mean, the responses were pretty spread out, but pretty even in a lot of ways. Apart from the once a year, it's nice to see that people are looking up things more than once a year.
Right.
That one was only 9.2% of responses said once a year they seek out research articles. So,
yeah, about 50% of the participants are looking at journals at least monthly. So again, that's cool to see that in our profession, people are looking up journals specifically, just about monthly or more. And so online is not just for articles or blogs that are opinionated. People are going online to look up the research. And as a science and art-based profession, that's important because we need to make sure that we are keeping ourselves up to date on the latest research and using evidence-based, interventions. So
Absolutely.
that was I really liked the well-roundedness that we received on that question.
Yeah. Good job, OTs. And
Yeah.
Way to look up your research.
Exactly. So to sum all this up, at least that little survey that we did, AOTA is still definitely the go-to resource, whether it be the AJOT or the vast majority of information that AOTA really does have. It is the place where people are most going to. 35% of the respondents are looking specifically for research articles at least a few times a month. And that is fantastic. And AOTA really is that go-to place. Of course, there's also ProQuest. If you're an NBCOT member, then you do have access to ProQuest where you can look up even more articles related to occupational therapists. Facebook pages and especially groups, those are also extremely popular. And we're seeing that. I mean, there's several groups, so many groups out there specifically related to school-based OTs that have thousands and thousands of members of people asking questions. And if you're not part of that group, actually in our slideshow, we have a list of a few groups that we would definitely recommend. So be sure to download that. We might get to mentioning those at the very, very end. But the school-based OT Facebook group, you got to be a part of that if you're a school-based OT.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
There's some good discussions going on. Lots of good questions.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And then the last thing, to really sum up is that 75% of all the OTs, OTAs out there are looking up content online every single day as it relates to OT to better themselves. And that is just fantastic because we need more OTs out there that are willing to, run into a problem. You're in an IEP, you run into a problem, you don't know how to solve something. And instead of, delaying it, you just get online, you go to AJOT, you go to a Facebook group and you ask questions and you learn more about what you can do to better help that kid.
Yeah. And OTs are really friendly online. We're all ready to jump in and provide strategies and help each other out. So if you're afraid to ask a question to a Facebook group, don't be, because you'll get 10 to 20 willing participants to give you answers. And two, don't be afraid to chime in with your opinion on those groups as well. I've learned a lot just from giving my opinion and then, having a discussion back and forth with other OTs about what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's cool. It's also really cool because you get to see responses from OTs from all over the country, if not all over the world.
Yeah.
And so, and people have debates on there, yes, they're nice about it, but people do have debates, about some topics that aren't as well researched as others. And people are kind of willing to say, you know what, I get what you're saying, but that may not actually be really research-based, and maybe you want to look into it a little bit more. And so I like to see those types of interactions going on the different pages. It's really cool.
Yeah, me too.
So we've already mentioned a few of these different types of medias that we talked about. I just want to go over this quick list. These are all the different areas where OTs are utilizing the different resources OTs are utilizing to learn more information. And that is, of course, AOTA, NBCOT, and ProQuest, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, blogs, podcasts like this one. Yay.
Yay.
YouTube. That's another one that's up and coming. People are even there's even an OT section on Reddit. I mean, you can find people talking on Reddit. Professional development websites. We talked about MedBridge and occupationaltherapy.com, but there's also smaller blogs that provide professional development, kind of like we do through the podcast. There's even some apps. There's one called OT at Home for iPhones, and it's a college that put together, they actually put together treatment activities. It's like a little Pinterest board. Yeah. And then, of course, there is Pinterest, naturally. Everyone loves Pinterest. You can't be you can't be an OT and not like Pinterest. It doesn't matter what field you work in.
That's true. So what are school-based OT practitioners looking for online? Like we've already kind of touched on, research, intervention ideas, assistance with writing IEP goals. I see that on Facebook groups constantly,
Right.
Writing those IEP goals. Also looking for professional development, those online occupationaltherapy.com, MedBridge, are examples of that. But there's also smaller ones for professional development, looking up things for evaluations and other practitioners, as well as documentation and billing. There's a lot of things with that going on right now across states, across districts. Everybody seems to be doing some of these things differently in school-based OT. So I think online provides a good connection between all of us in the profession across state lines, but also across district lines, because so much of what we do is different district to district and state to state, which is, interesting in itself, considering that, just that alone is an interesting topic. We might have to, that could be our next survey.
Definitely. So when we look at research, again, ASIOT, ProQuest, the Open Journal of OT, Journal for Educational Research Online, which is kind of cool because it's not an OT journal, but they talk about all educational research. And so you can get a little bit of OT, but you also get a lot of that education side, the side that we may not get through schooling, but the teachers may get a little bit of that. So you get you get to dive into the educational realm for a little bit. And then, of course, there's blogs and podcasts that have their citations in there. Like we're going to have all of our citations that we looked at in the show notes as well as in our slideshow, and you'll be able to look at the evidence that we used, and then you can even look at the citation from those articles and you can dive even deeper into research. And so if you're interested in learning a little bit more about research, I would definitely recommend that you check out, if you haven't already, episode 11 of our podcast with Dr. Amy Sadek. We did a whole episode on how to be an evidence-based OT in public schools. And so definitely check that out.
That is a good one.
Yeah. And so the next area is actually going to be intervention ideas, and we already mentioned Pinterest several times for intervention ideas. But of course, Instagram, another huge one, because you can search hashtags. And so one of the more popular hashtags that you can search to find ideas is actually hashtag therapy ideas.
Right. And I think too, when we're talking about interventions, Pinterest and Instagram are great for just the ideas for the activities we're going to do. But I do love the discussion, again, with Facebook groups on how we're going to implement those activities. So it's kind of like the frequency, the duration, the how often, what are we, more than just the doing, but what's the progression of those treatments? And sometimes those discussions are happening more on Facebook.
Yeah, that's the thing about Facebook. You can get a little deeper into stuff. You can actually have a real conversation. Instagram isn't really a conversation driven. It's obviously picture driven. And same thing with Pinterest. You're not really replying to the people that posted an activity on a Pinterest board. You're really just it's clickbait in a way. You click on it, you get the information you want, and then you're on to the next one. Whereas Facebook is definitely more interactive. You have conversations with people. So
and on another note, AOTA also had an article about how what is a good, essentially frequency and duration for pediatric therapies. So it was kind of an interesting, what is an effective way of delivering services?
Was that the OT practice that just came out?
OT practice. Yep. I think it was an OT practice article.
I think it was. Yeah. I've been meaning, it's on my to read list.
It's on my to read list, and I read it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
It was really pretty interesting. I cannot remember everything that was in it offhand right now. I wish I would have written it down, but, things like that. It's kind of nice because if you can tie it all back together, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. All right.
That's what it was on. Dosage.
Yeah. And was it about school-based or was it about more clinic?
I think it was more clinic-based.
All right.
But again, I think dosage and school-based is an area we could all work on as well.
Yeah. another topic for another day.
Right. Oh, so many topics. All right.
All right. So then we get into IEP goals. And like Abby said, Facebook is a great place for IEP goals. But so are blogs. There are different bloggers out there per se that have actually created IEP goal banks, and you can find some out there. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but it does exist. There have been some therapists that put together free goal banks, and OTs, you're more than welcome to find them and edit them to your liking and make it work. So.
Definitely.
And I guess I should mention, we also do have a podcast about SMART goals. And real quick, I am going to say that is actually episode number 3, way back, episode number 3. Oh my gosh, it seems so long ago now. I know.
Back when we were just babies.
Baby OT podcast. But yeah, so otschoolhouse.com/episode 3. And that is the link to find out about we did an entire podcast about SMART goals. And, your goals need to be specific, measurable, articulate, relevant, and what's the last one? T for time-based, and educational.
Right. And also A is attainable.
Attainable.
Sorry.
Not articulate.
But I mean, you can be articulate and attainable. Should you care to be both?
Yes. All right. And then, of course, there are professional development courses out there that do focus on IEP goals. So, all right. I'm going to kind of group these last 3 together. It's
good idea.
Professional development.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about professional development already.
We have.
Evaluations and networking. Sorry, networking. Yeah, and we'll do the last one all by myself because that's a whole nother beast. But professional development, evaluations, and networking, just about all the social medias that are very interactive, I would say. Blogs are good for getting really deep, such as learning a little bit about evaluations. We did a podcast on evaluations, episode 6, I believe it was. But when it comes to networking, Instagram, LinkedIn, people, especially OTs, we like to be around OTs. I'm sorry, but
oh, it's so true.
We love to talk OT. I don't know
We're
why,
our
but
own special kind of weirdo, I think. No, and I mean that in the best way.
We geek out.
Yeah, we're just nerdy about it, which is fantastic. Yeah. It makes me really happy to be an OT weirdo. Just kidding.
I mean, you can.
I probably shouldn't say that.
No, come on. It takes a special group of 2 people to put a podcast together all about school-based OT.
It's true.
We're pretty weird over here. Abby, you and I, man.
We enjoy it.
We enjoy it, and we hope you guys out there. Yeah. We know there's other people out there that enjoy it like we do. Otherwise, you guys wouldn't be listening to this podcast.
Right. And we wouldn't be making any more of them. We might still make them. It would just be for an audience of 2.
Exactly. So yeah, just about anywhere you can really go for those 3 things. However, the last one that we really wanted to touch on was documentation and billing. And these are, in my opinion, touchy areas. Yes, there are conversations occurring about documentation and billing on Facebook, a little bit on Reddit. We haven't mentioned this one, AOTA's Community. It used to be called OT Connections, I think, and now it's Community. Right. There's a little bit going on there, especially in the private practice realm, because the DSM has changed, all the Medi-Cal billing has changed, or Medicare billing has changed. The codes are changing in the last few years. But when it comes to school-based, you really need to be looking to AOTA's guidelines as well as your state guidelines. And AOTA does have guidelines for early intervention and school-based therapists. And then, we live in California, and California has a good set of guidelines for OT and PT in California public schools. But most states actually have some sort of guidelines for OTs, and usually it's paired with PTs as well. You can find, we have actually a resource on our website at otschoolhouse.com. I believe it's /guidelines, and you can click on your state and you'll be able to see the guidelines for your state if they have them. So that's a good resource in order to find out your guidelines.
So go check that out.
Yes. Yeah. And it's free. It's really easy to use. It is, it's there for you.
So the next topic I guess we want to cover about being online and using online media is being self-aware of online media and what you're doing online, because what goes online stays online. And
Absolutely.
I found this out when I searched my name in Google. We did a little experiment when we were coming up with this part of
Yep, indeed. And you know what?
this slideshow.
I think if you haven't done it recently, and I do mean recently, like in the last, I don't know, 6 months or so,
Yeah.
hit pause right now and just Google your name. Maybe add the letters OT after it, so you don't get another person with the same name as you, but just see what comes up. Or maybe put the city you live in or something along with your name. Or Google our names if you're afraid of what you're going to find out about your name. Google Abby Piranha, Jayson and Abby.
You'll see I have incredible fashion sense.
Incredible.
Particularly in my alpaca fur hat that apparently there was a photo of me wearing and I had forgotten about it. Also, I have a Twitter account that I forgot that I had. There's no, Well, and it led me to dive even further into like my old Facebook pictures from college. And I realized I have some cleaning up to do in that department as well. So I think if you just know that if you posted it and it was your freshman year of college, it's still up somewhere.
Somewhere. Yes.
Be aware of what you're posting.
The other things that we also want you to be aware of is how social media has affected people. Maybe not you, but it has affected people. And some ways that I've heard people express it, is that they have FOMO or fear of missing out, FOMO. And that's because, maybe they see, and this goes along with, feelings of inadequacy. Maybe they see Abby's post of her doing this awesome activity with her kids where she cut out these haunted house and drew pictures, that was a recent thing that she put up on Instagram. It was awesome. But I mean, can you imagine if you saw that and you just like felt so defeated? You're like, man, I wish I could do that. That's just too much. I don't have the right groups to do that with, whatever. So it can kind of lead to a little bit of a feeling of inadequacy, not the actual inadequacy itself, but just a feeling. And, that can lead to other things, anxiety and depression potentially. And so be aware that, people, when they're posting stuff online, it's typically like the best of the best thing that they've ever done. Like, not everyone is creating the best thing ever every day. People aren't traveling all the time. I mean, they post a picture of Hawaii doesn't mean they're in Hawaii 24/7. It's just that one really good photo that they took there.
Right. Except for the time I lived there.
No.
Then I wasn't.
Don't remind us.
Just kidding. But I was working a lot of the time too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would agree.
And on the opposite end of that, it can also give people superficial confidence. The people that are posting, they like to post their activities every day and it makes them feel good because they're getting some likes. I mean, I feel good when I get likes. When all you out there, like our Instagram post or our Facebook post, yeah, it feels good. But I also realize, just because I've got a few likes doesn't mean that that's the best thing ever. I can go out there and I can do better. I can do more research and I can continue to get better. And, my ability to become a better OT is never completed.
Right.
And the last thing that we put on self-awareness is that, this being online and social media, it's a whole new occupation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't want to call it an occupation, I'm sorry, but I disagree with that. It is an occupation. Not only is it a daily occupation, it's like an hourly occupation for most people 18 to 35. And so this is definitely something that us OTs can and should address and also maintain self-awareness of. Oh,
definitely. Definitely. And that goes into being mindful, not everything that's online is valuable and not everything belongs online. I mean, we already talked about things that don't belong online. I have quite a few examples of that, but also I think that when you're looking at things online, you need to use a critical eye. You need to use your clinical reasoning skills, and you need to recognize, that not everything online is valuable, and you have to vet what you're seeing. Again, goes to Jayson's point about, not everybody's on vacation 24/7 and that whole fear of missing out, but also just that, there's a lot of information that's sold as information that's critical, but it's actually a marketing tactic. I've seen things like, an article written by an OT to promote a certain sensory item, but that item may not be completely well researched. And while the article is written by an occupational therapist, you may want to actually go do your own AJOT search or your own ProQuest search before you turn around and buy it for one of your students. And, I think too, that goes into us as OTs. We need to be responsible and know that we're a research and evidence-based profession. And so if we are putting articles out there or information out there, we need to do the research to back up what we're saying and take responsibility, to make sure that our profession stays credited.
Yeah.
Credible.
Credible.
Oh, that's
Creditable.
the word.
Credible.
Credited. Credible. I was looking for the word credible.
Sometimes we're not too articulate here at the OT Schoolhouse, but we try our best. And yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, we put ourselves out there for all you. One thing that stood out about being mindful, that I actually looked this up on the WFOT principles for guideline or social media guidelines. And the number one guideline that they had was, recognize that the personal and professional roles cannot always be separated. And this is so true for social media. I mean, I'm going to use myself as an example. I kind of have like 3 different roles. I mean, I'm a school-based OT. I am a husband to my wife, obviously, and have my friends and my family. And then I am also this figure, this quote unquote public figure, if you want to call it that, between this podcast and the blog. And they all kind of merge together. And I love that they merge together. But at the same time, you have to be careful. I mean, you can't let something that you do in your personal life ruin those other aspects. And in OT, anywhere in the medical field and the educational field, that's huge. I mean, those background searches, man, like, you're not going to get a job without your employer Googling you, I don't think, these days, And so you got to.
And to that point too, I had some friend requests from parents who were also teachers in the district as well that I interacted with. So it was kind of like, ooh, parents of the student and a teacher that worked in the district. And also, a friend of mine on social media. You have to be very conscious that you can't separate. I mean, and you and I really can't separate the professional from the personal, because our faces are a part of the podcast. They're a part of OT Schoolhouse. And there's a level of trust that's built with that when you are willing to put your face to your brand or your background or your profession. But with that goes a certain level of vulnerability and responsibility to make sure you're kind of putting your best face forward on social media as often as you can. And so I have my privacy settings set to where I can vet things before they get posted.
That is very smart. And I suggest
everybody do that.
Yeah. And so, to close this out real quick, to close out what we're talking about, you got to keep in mind, what is on your social media page, whether it's words, pictures, video, or even audio. What are you putting as your likes and your dislikes on your Facebook page? Is it stuff that maybe you liked back in high school, but it's now something that could be demeaning to someone? You're back in your quote unquote stupid days or your whatever days back in then. And it needs to be updated. Is your social media profile accessible? And that's what Abby was just talking about. Are you closing down your profile to no one can find you? Or are you using it as a tool to help you grow professionally and keeping it open? And depending on what you're doing, whether it's open or closed, are you posting appropriately? And like Abby was saying, what comes up when you Google your name? That's a huge thing. And, you can't control that completely, but there are things that you can take down if you find them. And And the other thing that you can do is also dictate what comes up by creating your own professional website or your own personal website. Buying jasondavies.com or abbypiranha.com, and it doesn't cost a whole lot to have a personal website like that. And then you can kind of dictate what is found when your future employer Googles your name. And you can have on there basically like a resume plus a little bit more. Maybe a little bit about your family as well as your resume or something like that. Whatever you want on there, you can have on there. So
too, I think there's, what was it? Seth Godin talks a lot about that's one of the best parts about online right now is that people can individualize themselves and put their own personal website out there as their own personal brand, like something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
you have to be everyone kind of has to take control of their online presence.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And that's something we can help our clients do as well. And it's important to keep that in mind because we do work with vulnerable populations. If you think about it, working in schools, we are inherently working with children who have disabilities, and we are inherently working with them and their families. So we're privy to information and we know things about them that other people do not. And so when we are, online or we're using pictures of treatment ideas to help promote not just our profession, but also communicate with other OTs, and we're saying, oh, this worked really well, we need to be very aware that we're not using those vulnerable populations in a way that's not going to serve them. So I would say, don't post pictures of your kids online that you're working with.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion about it. But also noticing too, like if you're using a child that is vulnerable to your advantage in your own personal social media, that's also something that you have to ethically kind of question yourself on. It's okay to think of the activity or say like, oh, this worked really well for a student who had X, Y, or Z. But if you are specifically utilizing pictures of a specific student to kind of promote your brand or something like that, I wouldn't recommend doing that.
Yeah. We have a list here on the slideshow that kind of just points to some of the websites, the Facebook groups, the podcasts, and the different Instagram hashtags that you can use. We've mentioned several of them, like the OT for Life podcast. We haven't mentioned the Milestones podcast, the Sensory Project show, PocketOT.com, the AnonymousOT.com, as well as our blog. And then several Facebook groups. I guess I might as well. This is a podcast. Why not? School-based Occupational and Physical Therapist Facebook group. So if you want to find that, just click on the search bar within the Facebook app or page and just type that in there, as well as the California or even USA School-based Occupational Therapists Looking for Change. That's a group of OTs that's kind of growing. So yeah, definitely keep these all in mind.
Yeah.
The internet is here to stay, obviously. Social media, I don't know if it's always going to be the way that it is right now, but I don't see it going anywhere. It might adapt, It might get better, but it's definitely still going to be around. And yeah, OTs, we need to figure out how to use online and social media to our benefit, not only for us, but also for the populations that we work with, because like we said way at the beginning of this podcast, everyone's using the internet, and it absolutely is an occupation, whether it's leisure, whether it's play, whether it's social interaction. It is definitely a meaningful activity.
Oh, definitely, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, you have anything left, Abby? I think that about wraps it up for today.
No, I think we've covered everything that you and I know about.
If not, we'll have a part 2.
If not, we'll have a part 2. And I'm sure in like a year, there'll be 30 more things to discuss as far as this topic goes, because it's such a new area. It's just going to be constantly evolving and changing. And as OT, we got to keep our finger on the pulse of that.
Yes, definitely. So thank you everyone for listening. This, I know, wasn't the most like OT podcast. Like it's not something all about treatments, and it's not all about the fun stuff, but it absolutely is, in our opinion, a necessary piece of information that OTs should be aware about. And so that's why we wanted to bring it here for you all. And so we hope you enjoyed it. We hope you learned a little bit, and you can actually earn some professional development for this podcast that we did. And you will be able to find that at otschoolhouse.com/PD as in professional development, or on the show notes at otschoolhouse.com/episode 17. So we hope to see you over there. And otherwise, we will see you on the next podcast.
Thanks for stopping by.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the OT Schoolhouse podcast. For more ways to help you and your students succeed right now, head on over to otschoolhouse.com. Until next time, class is dismissed.